You're listening to the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT podcast. I'm your host and curator, Rabbi Avram Kivelevich, and I hope you enjoy this episode. You're blowing the dust off the old books. You're trying to find an ancient treasure. Yes, the Antiquarian who has Smicha has arrived. But first, you've heard me on this platform touting NRS, a great company whose many dedicated employees I get to see in action. NRS Pay has recently launched its new cost-cutting program called Cash Discount. The way it works is, any vendor using NRS Pay Cash Discount has their sale register tabulating automatically a dual pricing, which offers customers a choice of a cash payment, which could result in an up to 4% discount over swiping their card. If your business meets the $18,000 a month threshold, there's absolutely no monthly fee to incur. NRS Pay Cash Discount makes it less expensive to accept credit cards, so you'll save money while helping your customers save at the same time. NRS is offering a time-limited deal right now on this state-of-the-art system. You'll get a free card reader with zero hidden fees, no long-term contract, and no early termination fee, which means you can switch your processing plan without penalty. NRS Pay is a proud part of the IDT Corporation that I've been associated with for over 10 years and has integrity built into its corporate DNA. I know its founder, its officers, and salespeople, and they truly stand by their product and will help you with live, stateside-based customer service on any issue or question. Check nrspay.com for more information or call 833-289-2767. And now, the Antiquarian. Clear off the dust. The Antiquarian has Smicha. Hi, I'm here with Yitzchak Kolakowski, and you might have noticed with our new tagline that the projectionist has Smicha has morphed. And, you know, Yitzchak, we were thinking of morphing anyway, right? We've done close to 100 shows, but events, terror, war has really dictated that we really can't have a program at this point that's just dedicated to the frivolity and silliness of old movies and vintage TV. That's not to say that we condemn people who need a break from the front page horror stories. But still, I think without getting preachy, Yitzchak and I thought that we could sort of expand our show to be about discovering old, beautiful things. They could be recordings, they could be books, they could be paintings, things that most people perhaps don't really know much about.
And it could still be the TV and the movies. It's just we're expanding. We're not limited.
Yeah, and this gives us a chance to actually talk about old recordings, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight. So we don't forget our responsibilities, especially tonight, because we're talking about somebody who's one of the greatest of the Musmochim of the last couple hundred years. And that's a big statement to say, I know. But it's been pretty much confirmed by contemporaneous testimony about how great this man was. And the proof really is the incredible effect that this man's life has had. And I think that Yitzchak and I were thinking about who we need in our time. Who do we need? Because clearly we need someone to argue on our behalf. We need someone to argue on the behalf of Israel, on Klal Yisrael, on Eretz Yisrael. Someone who understands our foibles, someone who realizes that we're not perfect and actually realizes the greatness that's found in every Jew. And the person I think of the last couple hundred years who symbolizes that is the great Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. And we have found, it was actually Yitzchak's idea, I'm going to give you credit, that there is a lot of footprints in recordings and stories of Levi Yitzchak, which, you know, all kudos to Art Scroll for presenting the Kedushas Levi in a format that now English reading audiences could get a sense of the greatness of that sefer. I don't know how well any translated work does when the themes involved are Kabbalistic or, you know, machshava oriented.
When it comes to the Hasidic Sfarim, I think Kedushas Levi is one of the easiest to translate, at least on a basic level.
Mm-hmm.
It's very readable. It's very translatable. It has qualities that I always enjoyed, for already decades. His appeal certainly is throughout the Jewish world, meaning there have been many, many books written about the Berditchever, not only from the Frum world. There's a famous biography of the Berditchever was written by a conservative rabbi.
Right. Samuel Dresner's book, The Tzaddik, which is it's actually a great book.
Elie Wiesel has the book, The Souls on Fire, and he says that the Berditchever was his hero. And that was something that when I saw that description, that really that's who the Berditchever, he is our hero, he's our superhero. And with powers that are much stronger than anything you could read in a comic book, and it's real. It's real to this day. It fulfills archetypes that are very strongly needed.
Let me just give our listeners who aren't familiar, the Berditchever was born in 1740, and although he probably did not spend that much time with the Baal Shem Tov himself, who by that time, that was sort of the waning period of the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov, I think, died 20 years later. The Baal Shem Tov died in 1760. But he was one of the Talmidim HaMufakim of the next generation of the Maggid of Mezrich. And, of course, an older compatriot of the Alter Rebbe.
Oh, they were Mechutanim also.
Yes, they were. Yes, and they were. He was a younger friend of the great Menachem Nochem of Chernobyl. So, this group of writers, the ones who were the next generation after the Baal Shem Tov, Kedushas Levi, the Alter Rebbe,
the Noam Elimelech.
The Noam Elimelech, it is an incredible, like Gershon Sholem has already indicated, that this is a burst of intellectual energy that is almost unmatched in any period in Jewish history. The types of original and important ideas. I want to just point out that the Kedushas Levi has two sections. There is what is considered sort of the standard homilies on the Parsha, but he also has giant essays, which he calls Kedushos, where he really, in a huge form, takes on major topics of the Yomim Tovim, and he has like 7 Kedushos, right, which really take on which the Yom Noraim and Purim, especially Pesach, in ways that show the interconnectivity of Hasidic thought and how well it's tethered in Kabbalistic principles. His image, his persona, as in Hebrew we call it the Meilitz Yosher.
In Aramaic they say Sanagoria Shel Yisrael.
Right, the defender and the person you want, who has the incredible amount of love of God and chutzpah towards God to be able to argue the case for the Jewish people, and to do it in a way that doesn't put off the judge, right? He does it in a way that models what does it mean, like Moshe Rabbeinu himself, to not allow the destruction or any Jew to be hurt. And these are the stories that have come down to us. We talk about that his persona, the 4th generation, or actually 3rd and a half generation of Hasidic Rebbes, that was in many ways led. At least one of the aspects of it was led by Rabbi Yisrael of Rosh and Rabbi Yisrael of Rishon. He would spend every Leil Yom Kippur, meaning Yom Kippur night, after the Kol Nidre and after the Tefillas had ended, he would spend it like the Kohen Gadol of days of yore, staying up. He would stay up telling over stories of the Berditchever, speaking about the Berditchever, not because he didn't have anything else to do, but he felt that on Yom Kippur, a day of Kapara and Slicha, a day that we want Tahara, to tell Berditchev stories was crucial.
And also the Yom Adin, to bring down a good judgment, to have a good lawyer, to have a good defender.
In other words, mentioning him sort of keeps him alive, despite the fact that he had died in 1809. The other, his son, the Sadiger, said that even saying the name Berditchev is sufficient. You don't even need to say Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, by the way, which was not his first Rabbanus. He was Rav in other small towns beforehand. And in fact, there's a letter in the back of the Sefer Noam Elimelech that deals with the sort of the brouhaha that erupted when the Misnagdim wanted to somehow vilify the Berditchever in the eyes of the government in order to get him thrown out from his position. But he was the Rav of Berditchev, despite the fact that it was sometimes a rocky stellar for him. And Berditchev becomes, it's a city that is now, even the name itself is equated with loving kindness and compassion. And just saying that, according to the Sadiger Rebbe, is enough to be Ma'ira Rachamim and Shamayim. Similarly, the Tzemach Tzedek, who lived also was one of the giants of that next generation of Hasidic Rebbes, said that after the Berditchever's work was so important that there is a heichal in Shamayim, there's some sort of way, some place in heaven where we beseech God, where if we somehow invoke Levi Yitzchak, and this is, I think, what you were referring to before, Yitzchak, if we just refer to him and refer to him even without his honorific, and we just say Levi Yitzchak ben Sarasosha, that there's a heichal in Shamayim for the tefillas to be niskabel in his schus. The Tzemach Tzedek says that. I'm ready to accept that hook, line, and sinker. So we're really talking about someone whose footprints and spirit are here, and we need to tap into it. We hope this war will be over, and we hope, therefore, this program isn't necessarily a captive of just a certain time period. But we want to tell you, without it being done in a super scholarly fashion, some aspects of how you can tap into Berditchev and to Rav Levi Yitzchak even today. So I think it's important to know about his life. You mentioned, of course, Dresner's book. There are books in Hebrew that were printed about 1957 by a person named Eliach in Hebrew, which is 156 pages, a very easy read. I sent you a couple of the pages earlier today, which basically gives you a nice breakdown of the stories surrounding the Berditchever. One of the songs that at least we know the words, and we know those are the Berditchever's words, and that is what's known as the Dudeli, which you think is really a sort of a play on words, because it could be that a Dudeli is sort of like a little song.
I think it's also a musical instrument, I believe.
Well, again, the reason why it's called doodly, because the word do is do, right? Do, of course, is the word for you. Right. And it's interesting, we at every blessing that we have, we speak to God in what's called Beloshen Nochach V'Nister. Like, we speak about God, Baruch Atah, and then we call him Elokeinu Melech Olam, as if he's not there. So there's always this idea of direct talking, you, and then we say our God. And that's usually the balance that we try to sustain. But the Berditchever song, the Dudeli, is really you. It's been written up in Hebrew as atah, but do, v'ich bin is do, as a shlecht is do. Wherever it is, it's do. Anything that happens is you. You are everything. You're with me. And even when things are difficult and when there is times of pain, this is like a song of recognition that God is everywhere, in everything. And just that recognition is enough to push you through. Right. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything is good and that you understand everything, but you know that there's God. And this was a song that you can find I don't know if you can find a recording of it, but I think you can find an English version of it, which was very popular around 40 years ago. I don't know if it still is, by the Diaspora Yeshiva Band. And you can hear a sort of a jazzy version of that song in Hebrew. And I think it, in a way, captures the period when the diaspora yeshiva was the in place to be. And that is sort of a song, I think, of simcha that can get you through even difficult times. Yes, I recognize God, do.
Oh, so fascinating thing. It's not ear. It's not thou. It's not usted. It's you.
It's the informal do.
Yeah.
Right. In other words, in Yiddish, again, just like many European languages and Russian and other languages, there's two ways to refer to a person. And when you speak to an older person, was will dir? If you speak to a younger person, someone you're equal, you say was willst du? But you're right. Berditchever is saying do, right? Almost like as much as I know myself, I can know God, and I know that God is with me.
When Breslover also was, they had tremendous respect for one another. He said you have to talk to Baruch Shalom like he's your best friend. That's
it doesn't seem like it's, at least you might have to do a little search for who the Diaspora Yeshiva Band is and their song on the Doodle, but here's just a little sample of what their sound was like, that 70s sound. Here it is.
Tzadik, katamar yifrach, ke'erez balvanon yizker, shetulim b'veit Hashem, b'veit Hashem. Tzadik, katamar yifrach, ke'erez balvanon yizker, shetulim b'veit Hashem, b'veit Hashem. Odinuvun b'seiva, b'shenim b'ranenim yihiyu, le'agid ki yashar Hashem zuri, v'lo havlat bo. Tzadik atamar yifrach, ke'erez balvanan yizker, shetulim b'veit Hashem, b'veit Hashem. Odinuvun b'seiva, b'shenim b'ranenim yihiyu, le'agid ki yashar Hashem zuri, v'lo havlat bo.
Well, anyway, pretty radical, I think, for Jewish music in the 70s, Yitzchak. I mean, that was some electric guitar riff. And there's not that much, it's not as sort of, it's a little more open and expressive in Atah. But again, Diaspora Yeshiva, Antiquarian, we give it our stamp of approval. It is definitely an interesting phenomena. And they were definitely influenced not only by Rav Nachman and by the Berditchever, but by Chassidus Bechlal, and they really, I think, were able to turn it into something, that I think a lot of our American listeners could really get into. So today was Shlomo Carlebach's yahrzeit, and Carlebach had a tradition that was shared by others of a Berditchever nigun with no words to it, and let's play a little bit of that here as well.
This is minding this thing from the Heilige Rav Levi Yitzchak, and so Sasha, and everybody knows, whenever God forbid a person needs help, special help, you say in the chord of Levi Yitzchak, and so Sasha Neni, Master of the world, the God of Levi Yitzchak, the son of so Sasha, please answer my prayers. So the chord of Levi Yitzchak, and so Sasha.
So there's the song of the words, essentially, that Rav Yitzchak wrote for a song, and there's the nigun. And whether that's exactly the way Rav Levi Yitzchak sang it or not, I don't know, but I think Rav Shlomo Carlebach and his students and others have popularized the Berditchev nigun. We now come, I think, to a song attributed to Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, but a little research, Yitzchak, today showed me that this tune and the way it was at least developed in the popular recordings throughout the 20th century, starting, I guess, as early as the late or early 1920s, according to the University of Pennsylvania's library on this. And there have been 75 different recordings of this song, which is called the Din Torah Mitgot. We want to play, actually, two standard versions, and Yitzchak has discovered what he calls the Hasidic version. But let's give a little background. As I said before, Levi Yitzchak Berditchev was the ultimate Saneger, the ultimate defender for the Jewish people. And there's no greater day of defense than Rosh Hashanah, perhaps Yom Kippur as well. And there's traditions that you can find in Eliach's book on Levi Yitzchak Berditchev of how, at various stages, it was either right before the Kaddish or as what we call the Hineni, which is even precedes the Kaddish, or during Musaf itself, he stopped. And according to all these three versions, Yitzchak, Rav Levi Yitzchak made his case to God. He made his case to God why he could win for his community and for the whole Jewish people. And the basic point, I think, of all of them was that God has to give us kapara. He has to. He needs to see how we, the Jewish people, despite our flaws, are still bound to him, how there is no other reality in the world except through the Jewish people acting according to the Torah that he gave. And there's, as I said, it's either this seems to have been a true point, that he went off script, and instead of following the words of the Machzer, he put his own heart as a Melitz Yosher. He was very far from being just a hired chazan or a rav that happened to have a good voice, but he actually saw himself, especially on Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, there have now become, as the legend sort of grew, versions of what he said and how he said it. And I guess we should start with the one that you told me about, which is the version called the Din Torah Mitgot, which was written by Yoel Engel, at least that nusach, taken from the stories of the Berditchever. Engel, it seems, in the early part of the 20th century, went to Volhynia in Europe, in the Ukraine, and places where he gathered information about the stories of the Berditchever, and he put together this song. So we're going to hear the Jan Pierce version of it.
Die Metà din Teuer fin dein Volk Israel. Was hast du zu dein Volk Israel? Und was hast du sich angesetzt auf dein Volk Israel? Als was nur Azach ist Bnei Yisrael, as vino rakik Zemmer Bnei Yisrael, as vino ravor Dover Bnei Yisrael,
Okay, so now let me just translate a little bit. And it's sort of strange if it was done at Musaf, that he would say good morning. But again, maybe they were davening early. He's introducing himself, of course, to God. Probably if this was done, he probably said, as Yitzchak and I mentioned earlier off pod, that he probably didn't just say Levi Yitzchak ben Sora. He probably said Levi Yitzchak ben Sora Sosha. The other thing that I think needs to be marked here is that Jan Pierce's operatic voice sort of is drowning out the idea, which is, yes, I represent the Bnei Yisrael. What do you want from them? Why have you put so much difficult things upon them? Why have you gazettes them? Why have you caused them to sort of like accept the blows of life? But what he says is, but if you look in the Torah, you want Omar, you want speaking. It's Omer el Bnei Yisrael. The Torah is always Bnei Yisrael. You want to say Daber, it's Bnei Yisrael. In Erlach's version, you can see that he went on. You want to talk about giving a bracha, it's Kos Varachos Bnei Yisrael. In other words, there were references that, as strange as perhaps we've become from the biblical ideal, everything in God's Torah is all about Bnei Yisrael. Whether it's a bracha, whether it's a command, whether it's it's all interconnected with us. And I'm not sure if that is really brought out, by Pierce's rendition. But now he turns to a second stage where he's going to contrast, as bad as the Bnei Yisrael might be, and of course that's why this is sort of a din Torah, he's going to contrast the Jewish people and maybe perhaps justify why they have not lived up to things because they haven't had their own land. But maybe despite that, and maybe even because of that, they have fealty to God in ways greater than nations that are strong and powerful. And this is where the second part comes in. That was the Persians, the Babylonians, and the Edomayim, who were the Romans. In some of the Hebrew versions, you can see that he actually mentions the Yishmaelim, which would be quite relevant for today, but that is not in this version.
Die Engländer versuchen, als ihr Malchus ist am Malchus. Die Italiener versuchen, als ihr König ist a König.
Yes, the England who says that they have an empire, that they have they have royalty, and of course, England at this time that this song was really developed into this version. Of course, the British Empire was still very strong. And it's interesting, Yitzchak, I don't know if you found it interesting. The Italians say that they have a king. I'm not sure exactly who the king of Italy was at that time, but we all know Italy was always quite a chaotic type of thing. So I'm not sure if that was in the original mindset, was the Italians say that they call their king a king.
Chi se rom veni so ogni bellezza pensure mi Berditchev lei ha again.
Okay, he's saying that I will not. Basically, what he said up to this point was that although all these other countries have kings, and despite their descriptions of God, obviously England and Italy and Rome thinking they have God, but they are so enmeshed and so caught up in their temporal kings. But I, Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, say that my king is the king of high, the king of the God, the one who controls everything. And therefore, He says, I will not move from this place. And then he says it in Hebrew and Yiddish. I will not move from here. And I am not going to go away from here until... Yes, so as he says that he isn't going to move, he isn't going to be dissuaded, he is going to announce and proclaim that our Kaddish, which has God's name to be glorified and sanctified, that amazing, powerful name of God, that's the indicator of why we deserve seemingly a psak din latov, because we have never strayed as from accepting God as king, and we're the only ones who really recognize God as king. I think that's really the point, Yitzchak, right?
Yes.
Again, it's just a magnificent. You can listen to it again. I interrupted it just for the people who wouldn't understand what it is that was going on. But I think this is really what Engel, who wrote the piece, and Jan Pierce is really capturing here. There is, you can see there's a little bit, if you go onto YouTube, you will be able to find there's another Jan Pierce documentary where Pierce speaks about how this was a recording from 1952. 4 years later, Pierce toured the Soviet Union. And this was really at a time, maybe there was some little bit of thawing that was going on with Khrushchev, but it was a time that they let Pierce in, and on a tour, he went to a number of cities that still had large Jewish populations, and he was able to pack the synagogue, and he said this song was the one that got the strongest reaction from his Russian audience. You know, people who had been for 40 years at this point had been crushed under the boot heel of communism, who hadn't been able to practice their religion openly in any way whatsoever, were able to hear about the greatness of the Jewish people, no matter what their condition is, and they were still able to say Yiskadal v'Yiskadash. So this was something that meant a lot to him. Anybody who hears this has to be impressed with the real emotion and feeling. I heard his Nessa Dorma, which is also available on YouTube, and it doesn't have anything like this type of passion and inhabiting the song. Here is the anomaly now that comes up. From the 1930s on, this song in translation was part of the repertoire of one of the most important American singers, someone who had a very interesting life, someone who ended his life in the Soviet Union. He was one of the real first great black singers of the 20th century, someone who was almost a crossover talent, Paul Robeson. And, Paul Robeson, his affiliation with Jews was very strong. Now, he was a showman, and he built up his affiliation to any audience. And he had an idea of the great African tradition of singing, which he felt might have been like the cradle of all sorts of chanting and singing. But I think he really meant it when he said that this song meant something to him. He felt that somehow, and he tried to trace it with sort of pseudo-historicism, how it might have crept in this sort of fashion of singing to Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev himself in the 18th century. But as I said, I don't know if this was exactly the pattern that the original Levi Yitzchak used, but he was definitely caught up in this. And he made this, as I said, part of his repertoire throughout his life. There is a recording from 1958 from Carnegie Hall of Robeson's edition of what he called the Hasidic chant. So let's take a listen to that.
A good day to thee, Lord God Almighty. I, Levi Isaac, son of Sarah, from Berditchev. Here am I before thee, with a grave and earnest plea for this my people. What hast thou done to this thy people? Why hast thou so oppressed this thy people? Wherever sorrow, surely the sons of the oppressed. Whoever suffers, ever the sons of the oppressed. Whatever betide, there is spite against the sons of the oppressed.
Right. Again, now, of course, this is really Yitzchak, a sort of a. This is not what Pierce was singing. He wasn't talking about the sons of the oppressed. He was talking about Bnei Yisrael, right? Which
Right.
Robeson has changed to the oppressive. I like the fact that he says good day and not good morning. But as you pointed out to me off pod, Robeson, because of his seeing this song, and it's of course incredible today in the middle of the Gaza war, where Israel is considered, the oppressor. In Robeson's time, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the Jews were the oppressed minority who bonded together with the blacks, who were trying to get their country, trying to get rights.
They say he was somewhat fluent in Yiddish. He would help a lot of Jewish immigrants.
And Jews helped him. Jews, many of his of his performances in the 1930s was bankrolled by Jewish agencies and Jewish events. But again, I think here he is really, in a way, trying to universalize what obviously the original intent is, and he as he stresses the oppressed, even in terms of the way he translates the idea of eingesetzt, which is is really pushed by God, but not necessarily oppressed to the way he's making it. I think he really he took that term and he keeps on talking about the sons of the oppressed, which again, as you say, is really furthering his own communist type of mentality. But here we go.
A God on high, on this earth how many nations, the Romans, the Persians, the Babylonians, the Germans, what boast they, our rulers above all rulers, the Romans, what boast they, our kingdom is above all kingdoms. But I, Levi Isaac, son of Sarah, from Berditchev declare, is Gadol, the is Kadosh, Shemei Rabo, and I, Levi Isaac, son of Sarah, from Berditchev declare, from my place I will not move, I will not move from my place, and an end let there be to all this sorrow and suffering. Is Gadol, the is Kadosh, Shemei Rabo.
Yes, so here we have, this is the baritone. And he is a magnificent, powerful singer. But again, really, Yitzchak, you do not have the Melech HaYoshev Akisei Rambani, so you don't have this idea that we extol a God that's beyond. It's really a knock on the powers that be. Germany, I think that's mentioned there. England, interestingly not mentioned. Again, if you would really know what's going on in Russia, the communists would clearly not be in favor, right? The ones that he was in league with. So basically what he's, and really in Pierce's version, it isn't an end to suffering. It's just that I'm not going to move here until you give kapara to Klal Yisrael. I'm not going to move her until you forgive them and you recognize what they are, but not necessarily, yes, the suffering will end, but it's not a plea for a messianic different world. It's about recognizing what our role is and how significant a role we play. What Robeson is talking about is an end to suffering. And he doesn't tie it into the kingdom of God. And I think it could definitely be interpreted really as a movement among people to work together, blacks and whites and Jews and non-Jews, to put an end to human suffering, which of course is something noble. But I don't believe the Berditchever was after that.
You know, it was, I guess, around the same time that the Satmar was writing. I don't think he was aware of recordings like this, but when he was writing the Veil Moshe was in the late 50s, and he said, you know, a lot of people paint the Berditchever, you know, to be this big liberal, this hippie, and he said, even though the term hippie wasn't around yet, he pointed out, and he could find quotes throughout the Kedushas Levi of different kanoyas of you know, zealotry in that the Berditchever was he was a frummer person. He wasn't the total.
He wasn't a secular humanist, and definitely nothing like a communist.
I love this recording nonetheless. I'm not really criticizing the recording, and these are both beautiful recordings that are really quite touching.
You pointed out to me a little while ago that there is a Hasidic version of this recording, which really has a different tone. It's quicker. It's not so much a Rosh Hashanah plea as the books of judgment are opened, but rather it's like a Yom Kippur plea for the Averos, for the sins of Klal Yisrael to be gone.
And the request is to make, it's not a din Torah, but rather it's to make a trade. It's to make a chalif, and it's the machna bayit, to make an exchange.
So here we have a version of it that was produced by Suki and Ding. We're not sure exactly who is the singer, but Yitzchak feels that, you know, as if part of being the Antiquarian is coming up with something, the authenticity, this might be a more authentic sense.
I'm not sure if it's more authentic, but it's certainly more what the Masorah that what I am familiar with. And this is the way that I usually, if I'm singing this is the version that I use.
Okay, so let's hear it.
Weißt du, was der Bad wird sein?
Yeah, again, you know, Yitzchak, we talked about the informality of the doodly. I mean, this is very informal, right? He says, I want to make a deal with you. You know what it is? Like it's almost like, you know, a Jew handling in the market. You know what it is? I'll tell you what it is. You want to know what it is? I'm about to tell you what the deal is. Okay, so the deal is I'm going to give you Averos, right? Now, you have to understand what this means. I'm going to give God Averos. Of course, we perform those. So really the idea of the Berditchever saying, I'm giving to God my Averos, which means I understand that everything is God. And that what I did was not me. That I'm giving the Averos to you because that really isn't who I was, even though I was bound up and tied into that. And when I was doing it, I was not cognizant of you. And I thought that was me and I was enjoying it. I give that back to you. And I say that really there's something greater inside of me, which is separate from those Averos. So I give them to you as much as they represented my individuality and my distance from you, my sense of glorying in a separate self. I give that back. I think that's the only way I can understand what it means. But anyway, here we go.
Frage, was du wirst mir geben, der Fall.
Right. Maybe you're going to ask, like, what are you giving me back? Right. In other words, you're taking, right. In other words, what is it that I want for them? I'm giving you these averos. I'm giving you this selflessness. I'm willing to really, to do tshuva on this very high level.
On the simplest level, without, just translating it, it's like I have this that I want to trade for that.
Yeah, that's right. If you're going to say, what is it that I want for them? I'll tell you. Zugachtir. I'll tell you.
mir geben mechiles liche ve kapore Tom veste meine glach auf glach
Here's the next part of the chutzpah of it. It says it's saying, all right, you think that's a fair trade? That I'm giving you my sins, and in return I'm asking for forgiveness. So is that really a fair trade? And you would assume, well, no, you have to give something more than just your sins to get forgiveness. You have to give something else. So is it a fair trade? But then the answer is no. I want more for this.
That's right. In other words, don't think that this is it. Don't think gleich auf gleich, that we'll just make a deal. I'll give you my averis and you give me slicha. I want more than just forgiveness and a lack of punishment for those averis. I want something more than that. Because of this incredible act, the way I'm explaining it, maybe it can give you some understanding of how the Chazan or the Berditchever should actually want more. And he says, no, I'll tell you what I want besides that. Over and above that, I want. Okay, so basically this is a standard phrase in Chazal, B'nei Chayim Mezoynei. This is what we daven for. So obviously God knows what it means. So sort of like, if you're going to ask me, God, what I mean when I want children and life and parnasa, Mezoynei, now it becomes a selfless request from God.
Right, and a religious one, and showing that these are devotional. These are not selfish, just for our own sake. These are actually
right. It's not that just, which is, in other words, not a Christian sense of, okay, I believe in you, I accept you, so give me life, and therefore I get forgiveness. Even when I'm asking for these fundamentals, which are bonei chayim mezoynai, I'm going to declare what that means. Bonai doesn't just mean the nachas of having children and grandchildren, but as he says,
Achtu es Hashem Elokeinu Di Mitzrayim Shrayim Az sei Gott is a Gott.
Nein, so geht nicht.
Als ich schreie, na sei Gott is a Gott.
Nein, so geht nicht.
This part is the part that's similar, very similar to the other two versions, right? Where their contrast to the other nations.
Der Pikos im Schreie, es ist Cholile nicht du kann Gott.
Ja, so geht nicht.
Aber ich bleibe Yitzchak, wenn's du das Asche so,
Okay, so Yitzchak, I think this is not as powerful in terms of the recording, in terms of the power of the singer, but clearly a little bit of a different message. You know what bothered me about it, though, Yitzchak? What is this Oivei Tate? This Oivei Tate business? I don't know.
Oh, that's just the Masorah of how. That's how I.
Yeah, that's the way you understood that it was Oivei Tate, Oivei. Maybe the pain of having to go through this is still painful. Although, again, it seems to be something that should indicate elation.
Yeah. And I remember, it being twice as long because every stanza was repeated. So this is a little bit of a shorter recording. And again, I've heard another stanza to it is that it goes through Tzavis B'nai Yisrael, Davro B'nai Yisrael.
Right, which is that's really what you heard in Pierce. Right. B'nai Yisrael means B'nai Yisrael, right? Right. The Torah can only be connected. Yitzchak, when you heard this, did you hear this as something that was being sung? At
Chassidus
Tish, but during Yom Neroyim or before Yom Neroyim, or not necessarily connected to Yom Neroyim at all?
Anytime.
Did you see did you feel it was the same tune that Engel's composition that we heard from Jan Pierce and Robeson, or was it?
No, it's more like the one we just listened to now.
Right. So it's interesting exactly, where, there might have been this diversion in terms of the Messiah.
Is that this one says Ben Sora Stasha and the other just said Ben Sora. I remember a friend of mine, he noted that Buber, he always just wrote Levi Yitzchak Ben Sora. He didn't have Sora Sasha somehow in his nusach. But also this version didn't say Me Berditchev, where usually I heard is Levi Yitzchak Ben Sora Sasha Me Berditchev. So this isn't exactly the version. I think in Chabad also they have this, the Chabad, they're very strict about which nigunim they sing. They have a certain version of it in their canon of nigunim.
Well, again, so I think, as we wrap up things, I think that there are the hashpah of the great tzaddik should definitely still continue and enlighten us. We are, as we said, recording in a time that, I shudder even to look at the news that comes over the wire in terms of what next person has died in the battle against this evil. And Darmoning the Berditchever is definitely a schus for us. Again, not just for me and Yitzchak, but I think for all of us. If, again, for those that are interested, consult not only, your library, Google. He is a person that we give more than just thumbs up to. We give our hands and toes and everything towards him as an ideal of a person of coming together. I think we can end maybe on this note. One thing that you see in the Kedushas Levi and Parshas Bo, and that was said over about the Berditchever, was his fascination with tefillin, and especially the tefillin of God. The Gemara says in Brachos that God wears tefillin as well, and that in God's tefillin there's parshios. There are words there are phrases, and one of the phrases that is in God's tefillin is the phrase, Mi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. And the Berditchever was said to have, when he would pray to God, when he would demand almost God's loving kindness, he would say, God, I can passel your tefillin, because if you don't allow tshuva to happen, then we are not goy echad. We're only goy echad if we can remove the averos from us, if we could recognize the achva that surrounds us with everyone. Then God's tefillin, God wears his tefillin. He would say also that when he would see even the most simple person drop his tefillin, and carelessly sometimes, how that person would lift the tefillin up, even if they had dropped in the mud or in the dust, and wipe them off. And he would say, God, we're your tefillin. We're in there. And now we are in the mud. You have to pick us up, pick us out of that pain and suffering, that and bring Mashiach, that your tefillin will be echad, that the words in the tefillin will be 100% true, not just in potential. He would constantly, and this is really, I think, something that Yitzchak, we can both take to heart. The Berditchever would preach against Lashon Hara, and would say that if we engage in Lashon Hara, which was so rampant, then we are disconnecting our people. We need at this point to have the Avos Yisrael that the Berditchever had, to be Goy Echad, for the Rebbeinu Shalom to really reveal himself to, in a way where the tefillin, the Mari Alma are shining and true.
I don't want to take away from your climax there. I think I'm rather complimented. There's just two things that came to mind. One is in the Kedushas Levi in Parshas Hazinu, that the Berditchever explained that when it says Rishon Hu L'Cheshbon Avonos, it means that because Tshuva Me'ahavas Donos Nastas Like Kazochias, so therefore that we during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur it's Tshuva Me'ira, we don't want to count the Averos, but once we're doing Tshuva Me'ahava, we want to count them so we can turn them around and make mitzvahs. You know, like the story that he saw, there was one Yid who was known as a big sinner, and he said, I'm so jealous of you that after, you're going to do tshuva, all the mitzvahs you get. And he said, don't worry, Rabbi, next year you'll have what more to be jealous of me for. But there's another story, I think, that really was, even though it's not really directly connected to this, but it's connected totally to all of these things, that the Berditchever one time, he said, I need everyone in town to come to this medrash, Noshim V'taf, Ish Bal Nedar. Everyone had to be there. And all he did, he got up, he had his talus over his head, and he said, remember there's a Rebbeinu Shalom of the Welt, and that's the Dua B'Shefer of the Welt, that God exists. That was the whole drasha, that was all that he had to express. And again, he was talking to people who were all Shemrei Torah mitzvahs, who, they all went to the mikveh every day and put on Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. But we need to be reminded that the Dua B'Shefer of the Welt, that God exists. Right,
and that again, I think takes us back to Ata, which is really the Berditchever song. It's Rak Ata, wherever. All right, so hopefully we'll be back soon. Yitzchak, I think we could say that we have indeed authenticated it. Take care, everybody. Be well. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you liked what you heard. If you did, please take a moment to share this or any of the many episodes available on our platform with friends in order to help grow our community. Until next time, Shalom.